connected customer is, I think, this next threshold where we're seeing the IoT go.
Sounds like people. Last question or two before we end this panel. We're going over here. Well, I was going to let the lady go first, but you're here, so go ahead. Try to be a gentleman, but he's going to go first. Go ahead, man. You got to introduce yourself. Button on the left, press it, it'll turn green. See, my customer service is heinous.
I'm Eric Smith from PTC and Talent Acquisition. Just a quick question for the panel. I know we talked about retail and manufacturing and agriculture, but what really interests me is like smart cities and what's your take on smart cities and what's the time frame where we see something like that?
You want to?
I think we can both give perspective on this. It's not for the faint of hearted. Government is often criticized as a bureaucracy for a reason. And they're having a hard time. The larger the city, the bigger the issue. You've got to have interdepartment alignment around funds and proof of concepts. I think what we're seeing is mid-tier to smaller cities being a lot more nimble, or cities that have, in Colorado, you've got Denver proper, but then there's some satellite cities and authorities that are really making great strides, have very significant plans, and have a lot of green space to be able to go and plan the future of what's a very fast-growing environment. And they're often a lot more nimble than the large infrastructure Denver core that just, is stuck with inertia and a lot of big interdepartmental stuff. But the technology is there, and what we're seeing happening is cities are making decisions around open networks. Typically they're deploying or pulling in multiple different connectivity standards. They have a rich plan that's either centered around transportation or entertainment or other things that's going to be a catalyst for change in what they're doing in the city. And then they're really reaching out to collaborate with companies that have got great expertise in those areas that may have proven it elsewhere. And we're finding that more and more all of the cities are talking. So they're sharing stories, they're trying to figure out what they did, and collaboration is happening. So it's moving. I think you're going to see some great implementations, but a lot of them are going to be in much more greenfield environments, faster than you're going to see bigger cities evolve.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, and I was talking to the CTO of the city of Chicago about a few months ago now, it's before the holidays. And what was really interesting, and I think you spoke to it, is there's no such thing really as a really smart city. It's really a collection of several different applications. If it's a first responder, if it's lighting, if it's parking, right. and I think that over time, naturally, as the data becomes more available, it will blend. But I guess my brief perspective would be that it still feels as if it's different silos of capability that are beginning to come together. And a lot of work, Chris, I know that you're doing. What's happening in Singapore is obviously a leading edge example of that. But there's a lot more catch up to do, for sure.
I'm going to spare everyone my commentary on that.
Hi, my name is Kat. I'm a relatively recent transaction from Silicon Valley, and I'm currently working as a data visualization designer. My question is mostly for Mario. So in my past time, I actually got a chance to visit the Citrix data center.
Yeah.
So my question is around basically the format and weight of the data, because I imagine that IoT implemented on the next level brings in a lot of volume of data, and a volume obviously if you have a video stream versus like if you have audio sensor kind of stuff. So I kind of want to hear your perspectives on basically what kind of infrastructure needs enterprise IoT might require, and also people who are interested in getting into IoT on a small business level. Do you think there's enough information that they understand the risks and costs of integrating IoT in their processes?
So it's a great question. I think I heard a couple questions there. One of them was about, kind of the scale and the infrastructure that was needed, and then kind of a little bit more of the, how do you get started and what are the kind of business angles. And I think that, the fact that you just talked about the infrastructure piece and the scale is, it says something about, I think, where you see IoT going, which is where it is going, where it will have massive, massive volumes of data. And I think one of the things I would probably argue, and the way, not to make it too much of a commercial, but I think a way that we have built up our IoT platform, which really has to do more with the connectivity of physical devices to the digital world, and it's actually quite complementary to a lot of what you've heard elsewhere with PTC, where you're adding intelligence and application enablement and then augmented reality and kind of tying this all together into total solutions, is to really make sure you get the scale problem right, because we've seen several customers who've come to us have been sort of reformed DIYers or have kind of worked in such a situation where they simply could not scale cost effectively to where they wanted to go. And that simple thing, as simple as it might sound, is not so simple to get at scale. So you bring up a really valid point, and I think that's one of the reasons why the IoT markets have crossed this chasm from do-it-yourself to just find trusted partners out there. To your point, Chris, about just this whole panel about channels and partners, that they're finding the right partners so that you can focus on your innovation, and I think this gets to your business question. Focus on your innovation, not the infrastructure. You wouldn't rebuild Gmail. Focus on what you're going to write. Focus on your innovation and not the infrastructure. Is that challenge as the technology is now becoming invisible, right? It's the Consumer Electronics Show. The greatest thing is, IoT was everywhere because everything was connected, and IoT was nowhere because no one's talking about IoT anymore. They're simply talking about solutions. The technology has become invisible. The solutions have come to the forefront, and that means it's kind of crossed the chasm, and the real innovation is about to start happening, I think. So,
I think your second question was awesome. At Labs, I think as you folks know, we do work with Fortune 5000, but we focus on SMB and small and mid-sized enterprise. The SMB is acutely aware of the risk of introducing new devices into their fairly stable environments, and they're becoming even more acutely aware of the possibility of cyber physical security leak or risk or exposure. I would argue that for